Hey, fellow cycling family and friends, I just want to tell you how gorgeous you are today, and I hope you have the most amazing week. Now, it's December, and I hope you have your gear list ready and sent off to Santa. You're a woman, this is totally for you. The 4-week cycling skills workshop benefits all women. These skills can be implemented immediately on the bike and trainer, cycling outside, indoor cycling, on a spin bike or Peloton. All your current frustrations and questions will be answered, guaranteed. If you're interested in joining me, don't wait another moment. With this link, you can get started at the beginning of each month. I know you're trying to decide whether or not to check out the 4-week cycling skills workshop for women, but I don't blame you. There are so many other online cycling training platforms that offer cycling routes and training sessions, but here's what makes my 4-week cycling skills workshop different. First of all, it's taught by someone who's not just starting out, but actually is pretty experienced. I've been working with free clients in my cycling club, CycleFit Chicks, all the way to Canadian national female cyclists, and I continuously update my coaching tactics to help beginner to advanced cyclists level up with these cycling techniques hardly anyone is talking about. Secondly, the 4-week cycling skills workshop for women is so much more. A lot of times there are online cycling training programs that teach you how to train intensely, but actually don't help you develop the fundamental cycling skills and techniques such as gear management, hill climbing, strength, power and speed, and nutritional timing in order to effectively become a faster, fitter, and more efficient cyclist and well-rounded athlete. And also, there are very few courses about cycling that actually teach you how to develop a smooth, efficient pedal stroke. The 4-week cycling skills workshop for women aims to fill both these gaps in cycling training. Not to mention, the workshop provides the recordings of the explanations, demonstrations, plus homework. In addition, you will gain access to a library of over 100 strength training workouts to help you level up, and that is all on top of the core curriculum you already get when you join the workshop. So it's safe to say I'm delivering incredible results coaching over 1,000 female cyclists through my cycling club, and now it's even more exciting to impact more female cyclists globally through my 4-week cycling skills workshop for women. You can't go wrong when you join a workshop developed by a woman for women. It's time to level up and remove the frustrations. So if you're ready to join, just click the link that you see and secure your spot today in one of the next 4-week cycling skills workshops for women sessions. Now, before the new year, with this amazing deal, a 25% off until December 31st. Limited spots available. Don't wait another minute. Click the link and roll today, and I can't wait to see you on the inside. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast with your host, Sylvie here in Ottawa, Canada. And I have a really special and interesting individual for you, Robert Mionske. Mionske. I tell you guys, this is not my forte, but I am super excited to have him here, not only because he's sitting in Oregon, he's straight across the country from me, but he is also an avid cyclist and a lawyer. But before we bring Rob out, we're going to give a little background on him first with regards to cycling. So he is a 2-time U.S. Racing cyclist and a U.S. national champion. In 1988, he attended the Summer Olympics held in Seoul, Korea, where he placed 4th in the individual road race. Since then, he's retired from professional cycling in 93 and is now an attorney based in Portland, Oregon, with a practice in bicycle law. So, boys and girls, I don't know if you know a lawyer if you're a cyclist who deals specifically with cycling, now you do. He is also wrote a couple books. So Legally Speaking is a national column
on cycling law, and between 2002 and 2009, he has also written Bicycling and the Law, Your Rights as a Cyclist. And I was just looking, you can go pick this up on Amazon in the US. And a book, which is a book on bicycle law published in 2007. He's also written in our favorite Velo News and Cycling magazine. So if you get those, his column is Legally Speaking. So welcome, Rob, to the podcast. I've got some questions for you. How you doing?
Great. Well, I'm happy to be here. Let's shoot your questions over and we'll see what it can do.
All right, perfect. So I always love to get started with your story on how you got into cycling, because you became, you cycled at the Olympic, you competed for the US. So how did you get there? Let's hear a little background.
All right. Well, let's see. I always liked doing outdoor sports, and I was first drawn to ski racing, and kind of
like downhill.
Alpine racing.
Alpine racing.
We didn't. The downhill event is not too big in Wisconsin because the hills are so tiny, but they do have it. We call it alpine slalom, giant slalom, and downhill at the time.
Right.
And I was, over the moon for it. I didn't have any money. I had to wait tables, or at that point it was a dishwasher to buy a season's pass. Mm-hmm. And it was my dream to become a ski racer, and a competitive one. And I think after my freshman year, I found out there was this place called Mount Hood in Oregon where you could ski year round. I was on the collegiate team at Wisconsin, and a guy brought a little brochure in with a picture of Mount Hood, and he said, "You should go out here this summer." And so I did. I came out here, hitchhiked out to Mount Hood, Oregon, and the US ski team was there. And I noticed they were dryland training with bikes.
Oh.
They were riding up to the lodge, and I didn't really know much about road cycling. I don't think I'd ever seen an adult ride a road cycling bike in my town, ever. We, like kids anywhere, we rode bikes everywhere, but
right.
Not 10 speeds, not the fancy ones. Like I think at the time it would have been the Schwinn Latour, which were sold in lawnmower shops at the time. And they had the dealership. So you'd go in and you'd see this really expensive Latour, and I don't know, maybe it was $1,000, which was a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that one. I got the one below.
You got the banana seat one next to it.
I already had that in my garage.
Oh, we all had banana seat bike. Yay.
Yeah. I know you can still find them online now, but so I started really putting a lot of effort into the dry land. And when I got back to Wisconsin, one of my teammates was a bicycle racer. And he said, "I'll take you out riding." And I saw him out in the group with all those guys with their kits on, and I waved at him with my hoodie on, and they just did not acknowledge me whatsoever. And a couple of weeks later, he said, "Hey, let's go for a ride." And he just, we were pretty competitive on the ski team. So he just took off, and I just chased him. And I thought, I am never doing this again, but I am going to chase him. We did that for a couple of weeks. Right. So I thought, this is not as much fun. My lungs were turned inside out, and I thought I just didn't want to embarrass myself. And then that next spring, I was in Milwaukee, unrelated to bike racing, and I saw there was a big bike race down on the lakefront, and there he was in the breakaway, and he won the race. And the light bulb went on because I had started to beat him in some of the sprints. And I thought, he's the top category, and he's winning bike races. I thought he was just average, and I was really bad. So I started my racing career at that point.
I'm a little better than I think.
Well, more like I can do this. I could actually be in the race and have fun in a competition instead of just showing up and then they all ride away from you.
Yeah.
And although that almost happened anyway, as it turns out, but. Yeah, and so you start at the bottom in the US. I'm sure it's the same in Canada. They have categories. Mm-hmm. I think they start out as 5s now, but we started out as 4s, and then 3s, then 2s, then 1s, and then pros. So that's how I got into it, and I found I was much better at that than skiing, and so I stuck with it.
And I guess being in Oregon, you could probably ski year round, or no, down road cycle year round.
Well, I didn't move out here. I still lived back east. I in the Midwest, I should say. I just came out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't make it back out here until 2000. I went to law school out here, but I didn't move out here officially until 20 years ago. So,
Okay, so how did you get discovered to be on the Olympic team?
well, it's not a discovery so much as a competition. You just sort of move your way up. I think really
Yes,
the
yeah.
first steps were, at the time, there was a guy named Eddie B, who's kind of a famous coach from Poland that kind of took over the U.S. coaching. And so we had a lot of Eastern European type coaches, some of which did no English, and we had their way of doing things, which, you know, they were the best at the time, besides pros in Europe, the Eastern Bloc. You know, they had all
Yeah.
the science
Yeah,
behind
yeah.
the Russians, the East Germans, the Poles, the Czechs. They were professionals, basically, even though they were under a communist regime, so they couldn't be professionals at the time, but they were like professionals, and we had to race against them as amateurs. So their coach came over, and we started using their techniques and training styles, which, I mean, one of the best things is they would, you know, they trained in ice cold weather in Eastern Europe. And so they would have hot tea sweetened with honey, and we'd stop the middle of these freezing rides, and we'd all power down hot tea to get our core warmed up. And one of the things they would have us do if you're really cold is you get off and run along the side of your bike, which
Oh, well,
doesn't.
yeah, save your toes from freezing, right? They start moving everything. Oh my gosh.
So what happened is they would invite people that had gotten decent results to come to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado, and we'd all race each other all winter. And then eventually they might see you, and they need to fill out a team to go to a race somewhere like Belgium or Italy, you know, like a third run kind of event. And I got those kinds of invitations after that first year, and I had some good results in Europe, and they had a point system, and all of a sudden I was on the US A team. It was kind of all of a sudden I was in the room with a bunch of guys that wouldn't acknowledge me a couple weeks earlier. You know,
You're like, hey.
quite a list at the time. But that doesn't last. You end up, you know, people are people. You end up being on the team, and, you know, they're all friends of mine to this day.
Wow, that's awesome. So then you headed to your two-time US Olympic race champ?
No, I was 2 times in the Olympics. So the first time was in Korea in 1988.
Right. And then 92.
And 92. So in 88, I made the winning breakaway, and I finished 4th, just a couple inches out of the medal. And then I went back 4 years later, and Lance Armstrong was on that team. And I also made the winning break, but had food poisoning and didn't really finish. I finished, but I didn't finish strongly. I had a good chance to win the race. Unfortunately, it was in a small group, but I had gotten bad food poisoning 3 days before the race, and I hadn't really recovered. So,
yeah, I have a race kind of like that. You never forget those, do you? I don't know what I ate for breakfast, but it didn't agree with me.
Yeah.
Just like stop you in your tracks. You're like, God.
It does.
So, yeah, it does. So then you retired. Is that when you went to law school, or were you practicing law or going to school all during that time?
When I made the US team, I was still in college, and I was just taking classes in the fall. And so it took me a long, long time to graduate, and I did. I raced a pretty solid.
Like, I raced, but I went to school, but I raced more.
Yeah. Well, what happens is you go in the fall term, and then when the season starts in January, I would take off. So it took a long time to finish. And then I did about a decade of racing, 1 year of coaching, you know, as a director.
Oh, okay.
And then I went directly to law school, and then moved out to Oregon, and I've been out here ever since after law school.
So you figured the coaching wasn't a good career, you might have to go back to.
Well, it wasn't coaching like training athletes. It was like being the manager of a team, an actual team.
Oh, okay.
Drive.
Right. You're like, okay, I'm going to school now.
Yeah. Well, what happened was I wanted to make the money without having, you know, all the pressure of racing anymore. But then I found out that it was actually better to be a racer than actually running the team. You know, because a racer, you ride your bike and you travel a lot. as the manager, you're never done working. There's always something to do. There's quite a bit of detail involved.
Right, you got to keep a lot of sponsors happy, I would imagine.
Yeah, and a lot of people
Find them.
Mhm.
All right, so you're off to law school, and is this where you decided that you were going to specialize in bicycle law? Because I think that's, I don't know why I think that's fascinating, but it's not something that I've heard of, because there's a lot of other types of lawyers, right? And maybe somebody might work with that kind of specialty group, right? But as cyclists, well, as cycling community grows and grows, is that what made you get into that specialty as a lawyer?
Well, it was probably a number of issues that all kind of came together. One is I saw what the work life of a lawyer was after years of just riding my bike and being a selfish athlete. And I found out what it could be like to be in the same seat from 8 in the morning until 5 at night. And I literally couldn't do it. My first job had the offices above a little canal where they rented kayaks. And
yeah.
I was in this, the staff liked to have it about 68 degrees, and outside I could see all the tan skinned people doing Eskimo rolls on their kayaks and splashing. And I thought, what choices have I made in my life? What am I doing? So I only lasted about a month and a half at that job. I had to get out, and I thought, well, I need to make a living, and I want to be involved with sports, and I have a law degree now. And so I had been used as an expert in a legal case for bicycling. So a motorist had, actually this case was a pothole, a really dangerous pothole had developed, and the city wouldn't fix it, and they knew about it, and they wouldn't fix it. And this cyclist got injured quite seriously, and his lawyer was suing the university for this dangerous hole. And, during the depositions where they interview the client about what happened, he had said, yeah, he had loosened his grip as he went into the pothole. And the lawyer on the other side tried to make hay about that, saying, well, you didn't have a good grip on your handlebars. Perhaps that's why you crashed. And so the lawyer knew me, and he said, I need someone to come in and talk about bike handling, because, you as a cyclist know sometimes when you're going to hit a little ridge or something, you kind of you have a firm grip, but you have a loose grip, where you're not going to let the bars leave your hand, but you're not going to grip them so hard. You're going to use your arms like suspension. And so they needed someone to say that, to explain to the fact finder, which is a jury, that no, in fact, what he had done was a normal way of riding a bike. And since I was an expert at riding a bike, I was allowed to give testimony. And so that opened my eyes to the fact that we do get injured as cyclists. And unfortunately, the more serious ones are on the roadways where, we share those public ways, those commons that belong to all of us, with 4,000, 5,000 pound vehicles, with people piloting them with cell phones and TVs and kids in the back and drinks. And so it's a convergence of a lot of dangerous things, unnecessarily dangerous, especially when I got into the practice. No one had cell phones really, but that's made it much worse. So I'm kind of jumping ahead on how the practice works, but that opened my eyes. And so I hung a shingle, as they say, about the law profession, meaning I put a sign up and said, I'm a bicycle attorney. I started writing a column for Velo News, which was a racing journal, as you referenced.
Yeah.
It.
Do you still write that? Because I was going to ask you if you got, so since February 2015, are you back at writing a column for Velo News?
I do submit several a year, about 5 or 6 columns. In fact, I have one coming in soon about insurance. And then I'll have one right after that about what we call conspicuity, which is essentially a big word for being seen, how conspicuous you are on the road. In other words, light.
How visible you are, basically.
Yeah, and with the waning sunlight in the Northern Hemisphere, something to think about. And particularly in the next month or two, where the sun is lower on the horizon and there's lots of bright when you have a sunny day. There's bright and then dark. And it's very, very difficult to see everything, and cars can miss you. So, Daylight riding lights is an option, this kind of a thing. So that'll be my next column.
Right. Oh, very cool. Yeah, so if you can, I'm going to look for that because I get Velo News. Now that I know, I'll be paying more attention. And I always make sure that I have this big, bright orange helmet. And I've got like our jerseys are orange, not orange, like yellow and pink and blue. And so a lot of people like them because they're very visible. And I always try to be as visible as possible. I was also very aware and making eye contact with vehicles. I don't live in the city anymore, but I don't know, sometimes the country can just be as dangerous as the city, you know, be biking out in the back roads by yourself.
Yeah.
So you just have to, yeah.
Cycling is still a very safe activity when compared to a lot of sports, but you know, our effort is to make it really safe, because if it's human error and it's avoidable, you know, like drivers watching the road, watching where they're going. I mean, that's the big crux of our effort. Hands-free laws, and you know, there's an attorney that's done a lot of work on that in Canada named Pat Brown. He's had the vulnerable user laws passed, and you know, stricter penalties for violations of cell phone personal device rules, and that makes a big difference. There's some hope that the public will understand, and with the advent of this e-bike wave, a lot more people maybe that never had been out on the road, vulnerable on a small vehicle, see, oh, now I get why they want us, you know, these cyclists have a beef occasionally with the way we drive. So I'm hopeful that that's going to change sort of the atmosphere. The more people that ride, the safer it is.
Well, a couple of things that have been coming out here, or just made notice, is that cars are getting bigger. So that means that, you know, how you had the lower, smaller cars where the windows were kind of at shoulder, you know, like waist height, so you could actually see. Now we're just, the trucks are like, the vehicles are getting bigger, and somebody have made mention that. And also hybrid cars that are very quiet, and you can't hear them approaching a cycle, you know, as you're riding, like you can't hear them approaching because they're so, you know, they're very, very quiet. Exactly. Those two things people have made mention about lately, that they've noticed there's those big changes.
Yeah, that's true. You know, the roads are kind of built, they're the ways that we traveled around for a long time, and they're not always designed as safely as they can be. And there's a lot of changes in that regard too, especially where I live in Portland. There's kind of a renowned infrastructure for cycling here. You can pretty much get anywhere on a bike in a protected lane. And they call them protected, but they're not protected. There's just a stripe of white paint there. So you have to keep that in mind. But there are some protected bike lanes where there's a curb protecting it. And then in other places you ride in traffic. We have a thing called sharrows, and I'm sure you have them in Canada as well. And it's a place that they have like a chevron symbol, and it indicates that this is a shared road and that cyclists can take the center of the lane and go, you know, at the speed that they're welcome. It's generally neighborhoods, you know, where there's another option for the motorist just a block away. So then you know, you can't get sideswiped if you're in the middle of the lane. And these are low speed, you know, like 20, 25 mile an hour zones.
Yeah, so I had a couple questions here because, all right, so I mentioned that you have the book. So if anybody's looking for the book, Cycling and the Law, find it on Amazon. But have you worked on a super controversial law lately that you're trying to pass? This is some of the questions that I've.
Sure. Well, I would say an example that there's a couple that over the last, let's say, they're not super recent, but in the last half a decade, that come to mind. One is called vulnerable user laws, and VRU. And these were modeled basically after the kind of a European way, where some of the burden in some of the European countries where cycling is very popular is put on the driver. In other words, if a cyclist, if you're riding a bike and you get knocked over, especially if you get injured and you're not really aware of where you are or what's happening, the motorist will give a report to the police officer. And a lot of times it's a self-serving kind of a report. Well, I was just driving the speed limit and the cyclist veered in front of me, that kind of thing. In Europe, the burden was on the driver to explain, why did you hit the cyclist? In the United States and in Canada as well, the burden is on the person that gets hit has to prove their case. You know, I have to show. So if I get hit by a car, I have the burden to go to his insurance company and show that he violated my rights with due care and caused my injuries. So the vulnerable user laws, they're in maybe half a dozen states now in the United States. The first one was here in Oregon, and it essentially made it more of a punishment to hit a vulnerable road user. And a vulnerable road user could be someone riding a horse, a person walking along the side of the road, a cyclist, a skateboarder, rollerblader. We don't have a seatbelt, we don't have airbags, we don't have a steel frame around us. We're vulnerable. So you have to give more due care. So there was an effort there to try to make things safer by letting motorists know there are graver consequences for injuring one of us. It's kind of a mixed bag in how well it works. In other words, does your next driver down the road see a cyclist and think, oh, I could get in big trouble if I hit them? You would hope that there'd be enough compassion for a fellow human to realize, I don't want to injure this person. But there's this thing that happens when you're in a car, you're separated. It's like they're the other. We're the drivers, we're in the cars, we're in a hurry to get to our next appointment and to get to Starbucks, to get to the market, to pick up the kids. And there's somebody in my way right now. And so there's this sort of antagonism that develops on the roadways. And so that was one example. Another that's probably a lot more interesting to your listeners is the Idaho rules. In the early 80s, Idaho became the first state to allow cyclists to roll stop signs. And it's called it's the Idaho stop. And we
Idaho bicycle stop or just Idaho stop?
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, I'm not sure what the choice of verbiage was, but essentially what it says is you can treat a stop sign like a yield sign, which is what cyclists did anyhow, right? So you come to a four-way stop out on some country roads and there isn't anyone from miles away.
Yeah.
You come to a complete stop, look around, and then accelerate. No, you're going to roll right through. You're essentially using it as a yield sign.
Yeah.
And so they've renamed it stop as yield, meaning a stop sign is now treated as a yield sign. And
is this everywhere or just in the country? Like countryside?
No, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in the whole state of Oregon. I think it's in Colorado now. It's in Idaho still, because it was quite successful actually.
Oh. And
it's a great way. It takes into account that cyclists don't have engines besides our own human effort. That we're not going to crush someone if we mess up. That if we get hit, it's our fault. Typically. And so, you can't get a ticket for not coming to a complete stop at a stop sign when there's no one at any crossroad or anywhere near you. The rule is you have to yield to anyone in the intersection. So you can't come rolling up and, dive by a pedestrian. You can't steal the right of way from a motorist that's already been waiting at the stop sign.
Yeah.
But if there's no one there, you can safely roll the stop sign. So that's a really, because what happens is occasionally police officers will pull someone over in New York City that ran a stop sign when there's nobody around. Then the court system has to deal with that. And it's not a big nuisance to the society and it's not a danger to society. So that's a really exciting kind of change in the way.
I like that rule. Just bring it over to Canada.
But there have been efforts to bring Idaho stop to Canada, most definitely.
So maybe it's just have to change it to like Ottawa. Idaho sounds a lot. Ottawa stop? No, I don't know.
Yeah.
We put our own twist on it. Yeah.
So those are two examples for sure. And stricter penalties for using cell phones. That's really the big threat. People, I mean, I've
what kind of rules do you guys have around that?
you can't use them at
They're
all.
everything. They're
No
different.
handheld devices are allowed unless, by your work requires it. And so everyone's like, well, my boss might call, so that counts. No, it has to be, an official duty where you're in a vehicle and you have a communication device like a police officer, fire truck, emergency vehicles. I don't know what the full list is, but you're not going to use that as an excuse. So they're quite expensive tickets. I noticed that people kind of flout it, to be honest. I live on a street when I sit in the front porch sometimes, and I'll watch 4 or 5 cars in a row come by looking at their lap. The full duration of the view past my house, they didn't look up one time. So I don't know that we're having any luck in separating people from, their screens at this point, but it's life-changing if you hit and injure someone doing that.
Yeah.
There can be criminal charges. You can get bigger fines, and then you have to deal with the whole insurance issue. You've injured somebody, you have to pay for their damages. That's essentially what happens, and that's the lion's share of our work, is helping people get damages for their losses as a result of someone's negligence. People say it's an accident. It was just an accident. An accident means you can't help it. You could help keeping your eyes on the road instead of on your cell phone. So that's one of the things we have to do in the court system occasionally, because there's a disagreement about how it happened. And that's the lion's share of our work.
Okay, so I guess that would go along with my next question, which is the most recent law that you have passed for bike safety in Oregon, I guess.
Yeah.
Those two will probably go hand in hand. All right, now let's talk about, now I know you said you had some stuff that you wanted to share from a coach's perspective, because you did spend some time. And tell me, what are you doing right now as a cyclist? I know you've been in law for the last, 13 years, but what have you been doing on the cycling side?
Well, it's been more like 23 years, but
23 years, God,
I'm a road cyclist. Fortunately, I living in Portland, and in fact, I was commenting on this last night. I live on a little bit of a hill, but you can roll right into the ground level of my home, so I can ride a bike literally into my house. So I leave my car parked and I drive everywhere. I ride my bike everywhere for almost every single task that I need to take on. My dogs ride on my basket. My puppies were yeah, they were raised in a basket with a harness, with a leash, and I take them. I grocery shop on a bike. The pharmacy is right around the corner. The bank, grocery store, coffee shops, restaurants, the park for the dogs. So everything I can do by bike. So I'm a city biker, and I raised my daughter here in this environment, and you can imagine how you feel about having your child out in traffic in a busy area where people aren't paying attention. So I developed a system for her to ride in a way where I don't ever leave myself vulnerable to getting hit. And you might think, how can you possibly do that? But
you have to talk about that. What is this? A lot of us have kids, multiple kids.
Well, I mean, I only had one, and she followed me around, and I taught her on the road, like what drivers are going to do at every scenario, not to be in a situation where we could get hit from behind. She knew to come to an intersection, whether there was cross traffic. I'll give you an example, and this doesn't fit on the bike, but if you watch people walk at a crosswalk and they get the walk signal and they just walk out, they don't turn around and look over the left shoulder to see if there's a driver coming on another road with a green light that's going to make a right. They think, oh, they'll see me. Well, 30 people a year get killed just in my town walking. So my daughter, I watched her at school downtown. She was the only child in like 6th grade. She didn't know I was there. The light turned. They all just like lemmings walked out, and she was the only one that stopped and looked at the street, where the cars were flying down from the side to see if in fact it was clear. that's essentially that kind of awareness is what I taught her on her bicycle. We use mirrors, which is, considered very uncool among the racing set, and lights and bike paths and sharrows, roads that you can ride on, and you can get where you want to get, and you don't really leave yourself vulnerable. There's always a chance something can go wrong, but that's true when we're in our vehicles buckled in. That's true in life in general. So, it's the art of urban riding essentially, and that's what I taught her. And then the other part of cycling I do is I've been a road cyclist ever since I stopped racing, and I just go out, and it's my meditation. As you know, as an athlete, there's times when you get out on the road and you're breathing and all your problems seem to just come into focus, and you can handle it, and it's your salvation. It's your antidepressant. It's your anti-anxiety all in one. So absolutely. And just recently, we just bought a cabin in the mountains, and I've been getting into mountain biking for the first time, really. First time.
You're going to get into gravel.
We live on a gravel road, and we've been doing a lot of gravel riding, and I prefer the mountain bike trails. It's a little bit more, exciting going around the corners, and,
Well, it's kind of like you could definitely ride your mountain bike on a gravel road.
That's what we do.
You don't need a gravel bike, but the big, I'm feeling the big draw to that gravel movement, and I'm try to hold myself back, but it's just getting too big. And so I found myself getting a old steel Bianchi to ride. That was converted into a gravel bike.
Sounds good. Yeah. I haven't made the jump myself. I'm just using my mountain bike or my road bike. So
you sound like you've got lots of places to explore there anyways. So
sure.
Not a big how old's your daughter?
She's 23.
Oh my God. Oh, well, so is she following in your footsteps?
She's a great cyclist, but she's not a competitive cyclist and has no interest in it. She's more of a rock climber and a hiker, and she's kind of a workout nut. She definitely has that part of my history where she just loves exercise and movement, but she's not shown any interest in racing, which is fine with me. I mean, it doesn't matter what I think, but she never really wanted to do that. She would be quite good, actually. She's quite powerful, but it's not her cup of tea to, test herself against other people. She doesn't need that. She just does it for her own enjoyment. So I can't really see why that's a bad way to approach it as well.
Well, as long as she's staying healthy. And the law side, she
Yeah.
liking that, or she?
No, she graduated last year, and I don't know where she's going to take her, her degree and what she's going to do. She's in that stage as I was. I discovered bike racing at a kind of an older age. When I was on the U.S. team, none of the guys on the team had been to college because they were all superstar juniors, and they had the race right into their early 20s. I came in my early 20s with just 1 year of college left. Well, that's not helpful. So they're letting me know that something's afoot, but
on the road.
Could be anything.
Well, that's okay. We all know everybody's at home these days.
I
just my kids come home about half an hour, so that's why I booked these just before, So now there was one thing that I was looking on your site, bicyclelaw.com website. Everybody should go check that out. And you're talking about helmets. Are they really useful? Are they not?
Well, it's a subject that what did you read? I'm not certain what you saw.
Well, it was just I can't remember. It was one of your drop-down menus, and your was it? I just wrote down helmets?
Well, that's, they're not required by law. In Oregon, if you're under 16, you have to wear a helmet. They're not required by law otherwise. They don't have a lot of bearing on your legal case. In other words, if you're driving and you run through a red light, you hit me, the fact that I have or don't have a helmet is immaterial.
Right. It's just a safety.
It's interesting that one of the things you hear if you've ever had a controversy or a little contretemps with a motorist, they may mention that somebody has or doesn't have a helmet. It has no bearing on what's happened, but I wear a helmet most of the time. When I'm riding in the neighborhood, I don't wear one, just to the grocery store and around the corner. I think people should use whatever safety devices they want to use to keep themselves safe. I'm certainly not going to tell anyone what to wear or what not to wear. I raced with a helmet. The helmet technology, when I went to the Olympics,
Yeah.
we used a hair.
Let's talk about that helmet technology back then.
We used hairnets, like they look like wrestling helmets.
Yeah.
So now then the hard shell came, and now they have, as you know, they have helmets that are incredibly advanced in technology and actually save your brain. So I think they're a good thing to wear. There's a couple companies that have specialized on the way the helmet breaks down and lessens your concussion and protects your head.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. And then of course, mountain biking, you're flying by all kinds of fixed objects, branches, limbs,
Rocks.
Big rocks. Yes. So, you're going to be better off with a helmet than without. I'm not sure what the column was. I've got a lot of writers on there, so we post other people as well.
Oh, I see. Okay. Because I thought it was like something like a part of part of your law, like it was as a discussion piece, like is it really viable or not? But I always, like if you're going to get hit, I suppose it's always good to have it on. If you're in a big accident, I don't think, you're probably going to die from your bodily injuries.
It's true. When I first started racing, professionals didn't wear helmets at all. And now it's become so common. You watch the races in Europe and the spectators all have helmets and every racer wears helmets. So it's a safety item, protective gear that has become completely the norm from non-existing basically at the beginning of my career. So I've watched the change, and the statistics haven't shown that it's been that much of a difference in terms of casualty, but if you're going to ram your head into the side of a car with glass, I think you're going to want to have a helmet rather than not. But honestly, we try not to talk about all the hazards of cycling because there's this impression that it is extremely dangerous. But in terms of how it ranks with other sports, it's pretty safe. It's right around like where tennis is, It's true. It's absolutely true. When you talk about the kinds of injuries you can get doing all kinds of sports, surfing, basketball, our injuries can be serious, but if you're a safe rider and you pick safe roads and you have safety equipment on, it's a pretty good sport for staying alive and staying healthy. We don't want to scare people off the road. And as I say, the more people that ride, the safer it gets statistically for everyone. So we want people riding. And with the advent of electric bikes, there's a whole class of people that maybe didn't have the wind power or the gumption to get out that are now out on two wheels. And especially where I'm living in the Columbia River Gorge, there's an old railroad that went through the mountain through these tunnels, and they've turned it into a paved place for cyclists, and they rent electric bikes. So I'm constantly being passed by people that are,
you're just sitting there.
Right. They zoom right by you, and they're getting a good workout because they can push as hard as they want while they're doing it. And so it's getting them out, and they're not the best bike handlers. And so the motorists have to give them a little more room. And so everybody's getting a little bit more of a familiarity with two wheels on the road. So it's getting
Yeah, there is that, and I noticed a huge influx of new cyclists in the last 18 months, specifically when COVID hit, a massive amount, and that was it was good, but then it was like you had so many new people on the road, new to cycling, that, like you said, this the bike handling skills, common knowledge, and how to conduct yourself on multi-use paths, right? These aren't bike paths. And the road was kind of scary, but
Yeah, that's true. It really comes up as if you're in the old class of riders, I guess we describe as roadies, kind of like mammals, middle-aged men in lycra, this ilk of, 30, 40, 50-year-old men and women that are really hardcore road cyclists. They have group rides, and there's this etiquette about how you ride in the group, and you share the pole, and how you handle your bike as you come through the pace line, and the way you treat everyone and the way you ride next to them. And you get some of these newer riders that have the physical strength and to get out there, but they don't have the subtlety, like, for instance, if you see the rider in front of you touch their brakes, you might lift your finger up to your brake caliper, but not sure you need to hit your brake or not. A new rider might see that, slam on their brake, causing the rider behind them to have serious problems. So there's an etiquette and a style and a nuance of group riding that takes practice. It takes coaching and advice, and some of the newer riders would just like go, especially during the Lance Armstrong era, all these kind of type A, aggressive, physically strong people that were coming into the sport ready to go at it, but didn't have any of the braking or the etiquette about how you cooperate. But those years are behind us. But I'm sure that always happens. There's an introduction to a new sport, whether it's surfing and figuring out what the rules of the reef are and the beach, or
start over there and then you move.
Yeah, out of my way. That's my way.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm a local.
To graduate to the big boys
Yeah.
surf. Mentioning Lance Armstrong, I noticed that he did a little review a recommendation for your book. He was in there.
Yeah, he wrote the foreword for my book.
Yeah.
That was quite a while ago. Yeah,
I know, it's 2007. That's what I was like surfing through, looking for stuff. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. We were friends, we were friendly. He was, the year he came to the US team, I was the highest ranked guy on the team. And, he came in with a bunch of young guys, and it was clear they were on their trajectory to be big stars, whereas I was kind of at the top of my career arc, which I was completely fine with. I was amazed I even went to the Olympics, and so I wasn't intimidated, because he was 10 years younger, and I came up in kind of a tough area, and I didn't have the easiest of lives. So a guy like Lance was just like a kid to me. And but the thing about bike racing is great is that the strongest guy doesn't always win, or gal. It's tactical, it's chess, it's psychology, it's how much you can suffer, it's how much you can race for a 5-hour race, and it all comes down to going over an overpass in the crosswind, and who can go at 700 watts the longest. And a lot of that's mental. And with drafting, if you can catch the guy, then you got him. And if you got a better sprint, you're going to win the race. And I was a good sprinter, so I used to beat him quite often. And he, we would train together, and it was clear he was stronger. And it didn't bother me at all. There were a lot of people that were stronger than me, but it's like a basketball game. It's who's going to sink the buckets. It's who's got the day. So that's what I loved about the sport. Is it's not like high jumping or long jumping, or a 5-mile run where the best athlete just opens it up and you just hope to see you can get close to them. You might beat the best athlete in the world. If the best athlete in the world is in a bike race with you and they take off into a headwind, with a mile to go, and the second, third, and fourth best all chase them down, and they pull you in their slipstream, you're going to pass all four at the line, and you're the winner. So I love that aspect, the psychology, the chess. And so Lance and I, you know, I had a good record against him when he first showed up on the team, but it was clear, you know, for the racing in Europe and the tours and the, you know, the national tours, that he and like the other guys of his generation were going to go there and do big things.
Dominate.
And so it didn't bother me. In fact, I was quite encouraging of it, you know. I knew I had a year left, and I had no interest in going to race in Europe, and so we didn't have that kind of we're, you know, we had a decent friendship. So yeah, so he wrote a foreword for me.
Well, it's kind of nice. I too am most intrigued about the strategy that happens in the racing, and that's why I raced for 8 years, and I would say I retired. I stopped racing at 2013, so 8 years ago. It's hard to believe, but yeah, I had so much fun. Like, that's why I want to slowly get back at it. I know it's a different era now, different time, different body, and I have to treat it well.
Were you a road racer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you, were an all-rounder, sprinter, climber? What was your
I really preferred, I started as a mountain biker, and my favorite were criteriums, like fast.
Sure.
Like tight corners, accelerations, sprints, things like that. I wasn't that great on the road. I suffered a whole lot. But you know, I would go out, and I often raced by myself. So because I didn't have a team. So I would go out and I would try different things, you know, like my own break, you know, like, and this is what races are for, you know, not your A races, but like your B rate practice races. Like, what am I going to pull out today? What am I going to practice today? You know, I'm all by myself. What have I got to lose? You know? So I did a lot of that.
Yeah, that's well, where I came up in racing in the Midwest, the criteriums were the thing, you know, and and interestingly, it was 30 years ago, the purses or the prize was pretty good. I mean, I had races where I won $3,000 or maybe I didn't win it, someone won it, but it was first place, which was, I mean, I could pay my rent for a year. And huge crowds, you know, they have them at night, or they'd have them.
Oh, I've heard about your I'm going to say American Criterium like series. I'm like, it was nothing like that in Canada.
Well, it's the same dynamic, you know. You get out at a break and you share the wind with a couple of compatriots, and then they become your, you know, your adversaries for the finish. And so it's all of the fun of road racing packed into a action-packed, fast cornering. You know, it lends itself towards a more powerful rider, a bigger, stronger rider. But if you're super talented, you can do those. Like the Tour de France riders could ride a criterium and just probably pull away from people. They probably wouldn't win because they don't have the power to win the sprints, but they could break away and just make you suffer the whole day. It's kind of like track racing, you know, as you know, which is also fun and really exciting. It just don't have enough tracks around the country and in Canada.
Well, yeah, there's they're building one in Bromont, so just outside of Montreal.
Yeah.
So
indoor?
Yeah. Indoor it will be. It's currently outdoor right now, but they have like they're building a whole like a building around the track. So that's in the process right now. So that's going to be nice, because otherwise it's like 7 hours to Milton or London. So now, bring this to an end. You mentioned that you had something you wanted to share.
Oh, well, you know, when I was racing, as I kind of referenced, you know, I kind of raced, I guess they would call it, like, I punched above my weight, you know, if you're talking about like a boxer. In other words, I could win on my day. I could have a good result at a really high level. But you know, then there'd be, you know, a long period of time where I didn't have a chance. I could feel physically I wasn't strong enough to win a race or whatever. But on the days that I did do really well, where I thought I have a chance to win this race, And then you come to a crucial point, and on some of the ones that were extremely hard, like a 3-mile steep climb with very high level racers, there was this element of suffering where I had to, and we all experience it. If you've done any kind of athletics at all and endurance stuff, power stuff, you have to go somewhere with your mind, with your thoughts. And I recognized that part of what worked for me, that made it easier for me, was the breathing. You're already taking the full lungful, and you're out of your head, you're present, right? You're right on the edge. And then when the moment would come, you'd see maybe, the very crest of the hill, and maybe you weren't as strong as the other riders, but you realized if you could just stay with them over the hill, then you'd be okay. You'd have time to recover, and there's the finish.
Yeah.
But so it all come down to this next 20 seconds after, 5 hours of racing. And I would go as hard as I could. And then at some point you would think, it's not enough. I got to go a little bit harder or a little bit longer, but I can't take it anymore. And then the question came to me, well, why can't you take it? What will happen? Will you die? I mean, what's going to happen? And so I played with that a lot, and I played with that. And what I recognized was that if I could stay away from fear, if I could just go into almost like a meditative state, I could go much further and much harder and much deeper. So I started playing with it in my training, because during the race, you have so much going on. It's hit or miss whether or not you'll pull it off. So I started training for it. And what I recognized early on was it had a lot to do with breathing, had a lot to do with my operating system. What is my brain thinking about? So I asked people, when you're going as hard as you can, what's going on in your mind? And you get a lot of different answers, and it's very illustrative of the mindset. And so I worked on that, the psychology of it and the breathing.
Right.
And I developed some techniques for it, and for controlling my breath. And what mostly is similar to is holding your breath swimming underwater. At the end of the day, the act of at the pond or in the pool, you go under, you start going, and you think, I'll go to the other side and come back. Or for me, it was always in lakes. I want to see how far out I can go, if I can beat my best friend or whatever. And you get to the point now, of course, there's a whole sport, free diving, where they've taken it a million miles that way. They can go 6 minutes. They can go down 300 feet. It's crazy. But at my time, I'm more interested in that moment where my own internal thoughts say, okay, that's enough. And I thought, well, what if I go one more second? And I found that I would relax, that I would give into this other kind of fight or flight, like I need air now, and it would lower my heart rate, And so I started practicing that on my bike rides, and I started practicing it. And that really, I think, was integral in my ability in the big race a couple times a year to do a huge event, huge event in my career, to make a big effort that I wouldn't otherwise not be capable of. I didn't have the largest VO2. I wasn't a freak of nature for aerobics. I had to struggle and suffer, and so I spent a lot of time with that. And I think a lot of athletes that want to better their results overlook that area, the mental aspect of it. They think, what kind of equipment does that person use, and are they using a better gel than me, or do they do 4 days in a row easy and then 1 day hard? What's the secret? And I find that for me, it was more mental than it was any of those other variables.
I think people are more now looking more on the mental side, just from experience within my own club and coaching women. Like, say we do hill repeats Thursday mornings, so I go out and I coach them, and a lot of them just like first, they just have that oh my gosh, the hill, I can't do it. I'm like, you have, like, mentally prepare yourself for it. And it is all mental. And before they know it, they're at the top. And then before they know it, they've done 4 more. And you just like, see it, like you build up such not a negative, but such a barrier against certain things that you put yourself out of the game. And I can understand where you're coming from, because it's allowing yourself or pushing yourself to go that much further out of your comfort zone. Or maybe it's not even a comfort zone anymore. Maybe you've moved into that very, very uncomfortable zone, but now this is just going further. And
yeah, I think you're right. So what I'm talking about with breath work, you can get to that. That really horrible moment, you know, that scary moment much quicker. So what I did is I developed this technique. I nicknamed them Bob's oxygen deprivation intervals. And what I would do is I would exhale all the air out of my lungs. And then I would pedal, you know, I would count a number of pedal strokes. And what happens is you go into kind of a fight or flight kind of a thing. You can do it on a trainer, you know, if you're worried about, you know, passing out and falling down on the road. But that's
you got to be careful not to pass out.
Exactly. But of course, it's all the psychology. You think you're going to pass out, you're not going to pass out. You know, that's exactly what you have to face is this. So as an example, we're capable of doing things we don't think we can when we're really forced to do them. So if you were afraid of snakes and you would never walk in your backyard in the evening in the deep grass, you just, you know, it's a phobia you have and you would never do it. If an axe murderer is running in the front door, you're going to run right through that grass. So you have to get to escape. And it's an extreme silly example, but what it illustrates is that we have our minds mapped out of where we can go, where we can't, what we like, what we don't, but we don't always question those. You know, like, was that something I decided when I was 6 and I've always stayed away from it? You know, that scares me, so I don't ever go there. And then we build a fence around that area, and then we build a little zone around the fence. And if anyone tries to pull us over, they're like, no, I don't like that. I don't do that. You know, so you re-examine some of your assumptions. And some of the assumptions around breathing and dealing with anaerobic pain are really kind of mapped out in our younger years. And so the breathing allowed me to, you know, come to an agreement about what I'm doing, what is my effort. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to keep it positive. I'm not going to use fear. And so so I would get to those moments in a race, like I described earlier, where I knew it was just 20 more seconds. Of course, I'd already done that 10 times before, but now it's the last 20 seconds and my legs are screaming and my lungs are screaming and my ears. I mean, and so I learned to calm myself down. And then I had like the Olympic trials. The last time I went to the Olympics, Lance and a couple of the other guys, they knew they had to drop me up the climb the last time. And it was a hard climb and they were way stronger than me, you know, but I just had trained and prepared myself for it the entire year for that moment. It's like I knew it was coming and it did. And I to this day, I kind of lifted out of my body. It was above my body. You know, because they dropped me on the steep climb and then they were racing each other and they never looked back. And it was like I had to time it so that when I got out of the saddle, I had to sprint for almost like 2 minutes to just catch them right at the crest. And when I got there, it was surreal. It was like my hands felt like they were oversized and it was just, and so I thought, okay, so I've learned how to push this to the limit now. You know, is this healthy for me? And so I decided that was pretty much the end of it. But when I think about what I was able to do in that day, and I think about other athletes that have good ability, and I wonder how much of that have they gotten into, you know, where their edge is. And I suspect a lot of people aren't anywhere near their edge. And so for me, breathing helps learn where that line is and to play with it.
Is that now in your group rides?
No. Well, but you know what?
They're never that hard.
Well, honestly, you never forget, right? Like, so my girlfriend got 4th in the Ironman and she's done like 26 marathons. And so we do gravel rides and it was like 100 this summer and we were at the top of a very steep, hard climb. And I thought, ooh, this is going to be rough for her because she didn't have the right gearing or whatever. And I just watched her. She's just like, she spent so much time in this zone, internal zone. I was so impressed. And then I thought, well, of course, she's done like 26 marathons, you know, where you hit the wall. It's familiar territory. So for me, if I'm on a group ride and I really want to push myself against some other middle-aged guy that's really kill myself for whatever reason, I do have the ability to go
For
back.
coffee.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, or bragging rights or whatever.
Yeah.
I do have the ability to go back in that zone. Maybe not. You know, you never forget it. You know, it's in your toolbox. So I think it's good to train. And what I like to do is think of a big event where I knew I'd have a really hard, difficult effort, and then I would think about that day, and then I would train. And I would get it. I would go really hard, and then I would go to the point where I couldn't take it, and I'd say, "I'm just going to go 4 or 5 seconds, and that's all for today." You know, and each day I would build that up until the day of the event, where when the day came, and now it's real. You just go, and you train your brain to do it, and you don't even question it. You just know it's the moment. You know.
I like that. I'm actually going to try that next year, or maybe over the winter.
Yeah.
Probably the winter is probably a good time to do that. So let's bring this to an end. This has been amazing. Thank you, Rob. I've really enjoyed talking to you about cycling and about law, and now, just bantering about, bike racing. But where can people find you?
I am in Portland, Oregon. My website is bicyclelaw.com. And, there's a contact on there. I work with another firm that's in California, Washington, and Oregon. And we also work on cases across the country, not so much in Canada, but I mentioned there's Pat Brown. He's an excellent attorney in Toronto, and you can also find him online. He's a great resource.
Okay, well, maybe we'll add his information just for our Canadian listeners. So I know we have a huge listening base in the United States. So everybody, if you need Rob's services, you know where to find him. And also don't forget to follow me on, where am I going to send you? You can follow me on YouTube. That's where I put all my cycling information up. And also I have some free downloads at askcoachsylvie.com that are cycling related. So with that, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in for another amazing episode. And thanks again, Rob. It's been amazing.